turn that around. I'm pleased to hear what Carolyn had to say today, and I'm also pleased to hear that the Assembly is looking at other scenarios that perhaps may be more equitable for all kids in the state of California. I believe that the County Superintendents Association will probably take a support position on the governor's proposal. I cautioned my colleagues that my personal belief is to take a support on the concept of local control funding formula. But I think the devil and the opportunities are in the detail. And as long as we stay child-focused, this can make a significant positive difference. Now, prior to hearing Carolyn, and I shared with Carolyn before we started this evening, we have run through a couple of different scenarios for our districts here in Contra Costa County. And when we looked at the Department of Education's numbers as it relates to the local fund contribution formula, there would be 14 of our 18 school districts that would actually get less money than they would get if we continued with the current funding formula. If we looked at the Department of Finance, out of our 18 school districts, there are 7. And if we looked at a lobbying group, Bob Blattner and Associates, a group of our local school districts have hired Bob to, and who's also a Contra Costa graduate many years ago from Las Lomas. If we looked at the work that his group brought together, 12 of our districts would get less money over a period of time. What's encouraging is very rarely, at least in my life, my adult lifetime, I thought, for those of you who don't know, I had been in the hospital about 3 weeks ago for pneumonia. And recovering from that has been quite an interesting path. And I thought I was still heavily drugged when I heard that the LAO said we actually had more revenue coming in. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is that may be a way, and I heard Susan mention, and also Carolyn, that those dollars may truly increase the base and perhaps help the districts that we've identified in these various accounting runs so that all kids and all schools will benefit. The greatest challenge that those of us in this room who are members of boards, superintendents, or educators is that between now and the end of June, not knowing what the governor is going to do, we have to prepare and approve budgets. We as educators, we have to prepare the budgets, and local boards have to scrutinize our work and determine whether or not the budget should be passed. I think more than ever, we're really going to be scrambling after June 30th because when the budget is approved, in whatever format it's approved in, we have 45 days to modify our budgets. And that is a real concern of mine. Local school districts in Contra Costa are asking me, what is it we can do so that our budget will be responsive to the needs of our kids and also address what's occurring in Sacramento. And I'm basically saying, even though there may be more dollars down the road, that we need to be fiscally very conservative at this point. It's much easier to build budgets and add revenue once we know the revenue is there than to assume that those additional dollars are there and find that they're not there and we have to reduce. I also believe, and if you go back to the statement that I made earlier about what futurists are telling us what our children, our first graders and kindergartners may be experiencing as adults. Yes, we want to restore dollars, but I think we need to look very carefully at programmatically what is it we want to restore and what is it we want to do differently. This gives us an opportunity, perhaps, to recreate what we have called traditionally public education. We're now in the 21st century, and the model we have was built many, many, many years ago when it was appropriate to get a third grade education, and that was primarily boys that received that. So I think this really gives us that opportunity to be creative, to be innovative, but stay child focused. Get some water. I normally don't shake, but aftermath of the medication, the antibiotics that they were pumping into me. So I'm not nervous, I really don't. You can talk to your neighbor and they'll verify that. Now I want to talk a little bit about accountability. We hear FCMAC, and some folks shudder when they hear FCMAC. You know, it's the F word in public education. And it can bring people to wanting to choke and hold their breath. The way I see it, and those of you here who are from Contra Costa know that there have been school districts where I've had to help out under FCMAC. And I see it as a partnership. I don't see it as a gotcha. If a district is moving in a direction that they might find themselves in financial difficulty, I'm working with them all along that pathway. And we try to work so that the district itself, the local board, can assume the responsibility to say to their community, yes, we have to give ourselves a qualified certification on our budget or a negative certification. And then we will continue to work with the district, because the recovery plan for the district has to be the district's recovery plan. It's not my plan. It's not the county office's plan. But hopefully there'll be very few school districts that will find themselves developing an academic accountability recovery plan. I think what we all need to work on is the initial accountability plan that speaks to how dollars are going to be spent. Now, a budget, when you build a school budget, the major portion of the budget should be the narrative that identifies assumptions, direction that the district wants to go, goals that you want to achieve, and then with that information, you then very carefully prioritize how your dollars are going to be spent. And as we review budgets and we work with local school districts, that's basically what we expect. So an accountability plan that speaks to academic achievement simply tweaks that, and that we'll work together to see that that works. We won't be sending in a team of accountants if your third grade classes are not doing well. That just doesn't work. It'll be a multidisciplinary approach when we review accountability plans and the budget. It won't simply be our finance and business folks. It has to be our folks from the educational side. It's a multidisciplinary team. Those of you that know that we, in cooperation and partnership with Solano County and Napa County over the last several years, we've had date and SATE teams, and teams that go into school districts to help work either with a specific school or a school district and focusing on student achievement. And in doing that, we've been able to serve 11 different counties, 43 different school districts, 23 different school districts, and 43 different schools. We'll continue to do that work. There is a concern that, well, there may be smaller counties that may not have the wherewithal, the resources to be able to do that. Well, we'll come together regionally to build those teams as we've done in the past to make that available. And personally, I can speak that any charge that we'll charge the school district will simply be for the cost of the materials, if we have the staff on board or readily available. County offices should not be in the business of making money. County offices should be in the business of serving their communities, and the money that we receive should simply pay for the cost of the services. Questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. We now, I think, have questions from the audience, and we'll also, if you didn't write them down, you have them, hold them up, we'll collect them, and then we can also come around with a microphone at some point and see what questions you have as well. I want to introduce Joanne Durkee, who's the I'm going to let you, Contra Costa Council, yes, task force leader.
Right, thank you. So we have a new name, as Linda had shared, the East Bay Leadership Council, and as she mentioned, Kathleen and I co-chair what's called the Workforce Development Education Task Force. So before I get to the questions, I want to, on behalf of our task force, thank all three of you really for being here and doing this. This is certainly a topic that we've been talking about for several months, and our goal is to really look at education through the whole spectrum. And we have great representation from all levels of education as well as business partners, and we have some very lively discussions, so we welcome you to join those